finance that premium. We had to pick that up as part of the equity, and that's not common in the development world. You really want to get as much leverage as you can. That's what the game is all about. So that for me is the big obstacle conceptually for us to get around, and we are already working with a bunch of bankers and appraisers and financial professors and what have you to try to see if there are ways to tweak the existing system to get that kind of an emphasis upon long-term results.
I think I got your mic now. No, well, now it's great. We'll see how long this one lasts. Yeah, okay, it's working in the back. You know, the whole idea, the construct of long-term assets, at least at least where we're doing a lot of work is in the public sector, and the public sector certainly through their financing mechanisms can really think about, even though the building might have been built to be a 50-year asset, the public sector is going to own it until they replace it. So one of the great places that efficiency is moving faster, not fast enough, but faster in the private sector is the part of the population where you know, we have people working on our behalf who are paid to think about these long-term assets and use the length of loans and capital that they can access through the state or federal policies. So, and that changes the formula significantly in the efficiency that can be done in a building. A private sector client in the 2 to 4 year time frame, who especially coming out of the Great Recession, is still hesitant to think about how to deploy capital. In the public sector, that actually is in the 10 to 20 year view. And when you do that, you go from doing 2 to 4 year payback. You can get items that are now in the 8 to 10 to 12 year payback if you can get 15 to 20 year money. So this type of capital and how it's deployed and who the client is, even in today's society, it makes a huge issue and opportunity for the efficiency work.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add one thing to you know, the 1 to 2 year payback that an individual consumer might want, and the 2 to 4 years that a private company might want. If you can turn that into something that makes sense on a 20-year payback, that unlocks a lot of capital. And we're seeing some interesting models like that. I mean, the kind of utility guaranteed contract, plus bonus for savings model is a very interesting one. Financing energy efficiency investments on your utility bill is another one. So you, instead of having to pay the upfront capital to retrofit your home, you just have basically a fixed monthly fee that is an addition to the utility bill. Another great example is in rooftop solar. We're seeing a bunch of new business models, particularly with startups in California, where the company actually owns the solar panel and leases it to the consumer. So instead of having to pay 20 grand up front, you can just pay your monthly fee, and that 2 year return turns into a 20-year return that an institutional investor or a bank might actually be willing to look at. So it's really about finding innovative ways of linking capital that has a longer time horizon with consumer behaviors that typically have had very short time horizons, and we're starting to see that happen more and more. So, it's promising.
Did you put a cap on that? That will be probably saying something obvious to everyone in this room, but not obvious to the general public. We're talking about paybacks and time frames, but if it's a 2 year payback, then as most investors would look at it, that's a 50% rate of return. If it's a 20 year payback, it's green and it's still not projected. If it's a 20 year payback, then you're getting a 5% rate of return, and the difference is that if you're going in for that really high percentage rate of return, you're doing something that's relatively shallow. You're going into the ceiling and you're putting in a lot of insulation. Once you've taken that off, then the next person that comes in that wants to do something that is much deeper and more comprehensive, you've already taken the cream off of the top of this, and it makes the next investment that much more difficult. So what we're talking about is getting a 5% rate of return on a whole big investment, as opposed to having a very short-term, less in society's interest, high rate of return on a much smaller targeted investment.
So one other comment without the mic. Also, the whole construct here is about the solar idea in California, where it's not tied to how long the individual will live there. That it's really taken out of the equation. It's really against the house as an asset. And this idea of Seattle City Light coming in and attaching to a building and providing a financial return, a financial play that will actually then deal with the asset no matter what happens with the ownership. That's the hurdle. We have to get the utilities and the financing on the other side of the meter to be thinking about attaching to these assets and then letting the ownership come and go. But if we can get the financing to provide the money to do this deep green work in buildings, so it does provide an early financial benefit, but it actually can get to these 40, 50, 60% savings in buildings. That's this big hurdle in the financing world, and the hurdle of the current occupant. I might only be here for 2 years, or a building owner, I might only have it for 10. I'm not going to do 20-year kinds of work because I know I'm not going to stay with the asset.
So we're beating this to death, I know, but this is really kind of right smack in the core of what we're doing in the built environment sector. So just to take that to what I think is a potential solution. If you've got somebody like McKinstry coming into a building and making these investments in the building and having a rate of return from the utility, then what the building owner should do with McKinstry is give them a 20-year lease. And that's a lease for their equipment to be in the building. If it transfers ownership, nonetheless, they are there and they get to maintain their equipment in that building for the next 20 years. The second big thing, and this is especially true with investor-owned utilities, however, is for the model that we've been vaguely discussing up here to work. The utility has to be able to charge the people in the building for saved energy. And there's just no way that that's done now. I mean, you're metering this thing in the building, and the people in the building are buying, if you will, energy services. They're buying comfort, they're buying electricity to run their computers, they're buying lighting, but they're not buying kilowatt hours, which is all that across the world utilities currently sell.
So here's a policy question. There's a lot of policy proposals that track energy efficiency and compliance based on federal standards, and this could provide some uniform and credible assessments of energy use for states and localities across the country. However, these top-down approaches are often resisted by politicians, businesses, and constituents in many parts of the country. How do you make the case for uniform efficiency standards that many regard as government overreach?
I mean, it's a huge problem, particularly in this country. I think we probably have one of the most fragmented power sectors of any country in the world, coupled with a very strong tradition of local governance and local rule setting, et cetera. I don't know the answer to it as far as top-down. One thing that historically has happened is that places like California happens to be the example, have been kind of at the forefront of some of these things from a policy perspective. And because they're such a big market, they end up, that standard ends up being propagated across the market. So, I mean, vehicles are the classic example in California. California has always been ahead of the curve on vehicle efficiency standards, vehicle emission standards, et cetera. And just because California is such a big auto market, the whole industry ends up having to move in that direction. So, California is also a big market for, it's a big power market, it's a big devices market, it's a big, it's just a big chunk of the U.S. economy. And so, we may see, for example, as they move ahead with their cap and trade program and all their efficiency standards, that some of that stuff ends up being adopted by other parts of the country. I'm not sure, I personally don't have an answer on how does the federal government impose uniform standards on everybody question. Particularly given the way that the very strong local control, both the regulatory structure and the actual ownership of utilities.
We'll see if is this working or not. I think part of it, if you're a politician, for example, I mean, if it's about public policy, the easy item to chase that's near-term measurable is the rate, whether it's per kilowatt hour or per therm of gas. And so, in my term, if I'm going to make a stance, I want to keep rates low, or that kind of issue. That's measurable, and you kind of have to shift and get the conversation about the bill and the cost of energy for buildings in this case as the asset instead of the rate, and that's the idea here about getting Seattle City Light to step in and look at ways that the whole bill goes down. in the Seattle City Light construct, the rate can go up while the bill is going down, and it can